Hello, welcome to our special program, China's Deepening Reform in the Eyes of the Youth. For those of you who pay attention to the country's development, it is clear that the reform journey China has had is deeply impactful and also multifaceted. That's why for many, it is significant to pay attention to the third plenary session of the Central Committee of CPC, since during this meeting, a resolution on further deepening reform comprehensively to advance Chinese modernization was adopted. Today, I am privileged to have a diverse panel of young guests bring their unique perspectives on this document as well as the ongoing reforms in China. Thank you so much for coming to the show. These guests are Mr. Ian Wang Jiajun, an American student from Inqing Academy, Peking University. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. And also we have Mr. Daniel Barbosa from Brazil, currently also studying at Inqing Academy, Peking University.
Hey, how's everyone?
Great to have you on today's show. And also we have Dr. Nazmuz Saqib Zhou Kaibi from Bangladesh, now a pediatrician with Peking University First Hospital.
Thank you very much for inviting me at your show.
Great to have you. We get to see that these three guests are from different countries, and later on you will find that they are actually having different experiences in different fields and also coming to China in different times. So I am super excited to hear your stories and find out, what do you see? Do you find the document significant, or do you find any of the previous policies regarding deepening reform interesting or impactful, especially in your field? And for those of you who are interested in some other shows of CGTN, or you want to watch the playback of today's show, you can find us on all major CGTN platforms, including our official website, foreign as well as domestic social media platforms. Now, I'd like to talk to you about a little bit about yourself. So let's start with Ian.
Sure.
What is your China story?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I first moved to Hong Kong, Special Administrative Region, around secondary school. So I was born in Boston, and I moved over to Asia. And I really appreciated my time growing up in this, very fascinating city. And then I went back to college in the United States. But in the back of my mind, I had always wanted to go explore more of China. So post-graduation, I got this offer to go to Japan. And I thought to myself, hey, I have the opportunity to go back to East Asia. I can explore this country. But going back to mainland China was always in the back of my mind. And then I had this opportunity, same as Daniel, to go to Yenching Academy in 2023. It's a fully funded scholarship to be able to learn all about China in China from Chinese professors. So, being here has been such a great opportunity.
And I'm very glad to see that you had the experience of living in the United States, living in Japan, living in China, and that gives you a special perspective on international cooperation as well as locality governance. Because for the Greater Bay Area, you live in that area.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. And I am very excited to hear what you have to say about these topics.
Looking forward to it.
And doctor, I love doctors because I have doctors at home. My mom is a doctor,
Oh, wow.
so I understand a lot of doctors' perspective. For Dr. Zhou, I'm going to call you your Chinese name, Dr. Zhou. What is your China story? I understand that you've been living in China, living and studying and working in China for 14 years?
Yes, correct.
So, Dr. Zhou, what is your China story?
Well, I started my China story with Capital Medical University, where I studied my bachelor's and master's, and later Peking University for PhD. Well, 14 years of journey is a very beautiful journey, and in these 14 years I have achieved a lot from China. Especially during my student days, I joined as volunteers, Beijing Red Cross. I worked there as a volunteer, and also many places where I've been in China. Actually, these all experiences helped me to become better in my life. I would like to mention I was lucky to join Belt and Road projects, and I've been to many countries, attended many medical conferences where I could learn from the world and also share my Chinese experience, what I learned from China. Besides that, I also went to many places in China. I have been to more than 300 places in China. Yeah, and I like to make videos, so I usually make videos about my life in China so that I can show the world the real China.
So when I search 周凯比, I can find you.
Yes, you can find me. Also, most of my videos are in English for the international friends, and you can find me on Facebook.
Oh, that's super
Facebook,
cool. And
TikTok,
yes.
Instagram, yeah.
And actually, we are looking at a recipient of many national and international awards, including the SAARC Brilliance Award in 2022. So yes, I get to see that you have achieved quite a lot here in China and in general. And talking about here in China, we know both of you actually have experienced your Chinese story for quite a long time. You've been here a bit longer. Whereas Danielle, I know that you've only been here in China for less than a year.
Yes.
So you've arrived only last year.
I arrived beginning of September 2023, yes.
So what is your first impression about China?
My first impression about China is that China is really big. But I feel that coming from another country, I had studied China before, and this is the most significant motivation that I wanted to come to China, I wanted to understand. I have my own personal perspective in it. And then I arrived here and thought, oh, this is big and this is very concise. But then staying here, even just for a year, I already realized that China is much more diverse than I expected.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I know that you study cross-border e-commerce. Actually, you've published Impact of a BRICS Integrated Payment System on Cross-Border E-commerce on the journal BRICS Journal of Economics. So this is your center of your study. And I was wondering, is this subject have something to do with the fact that you choose China as your next destination of further study?
Yes, it has. This paper was the first time that I seriously tried to write something, but it was still like very much in the beginning. I was interested in digital commerce, and at the same time I was interested in international cooperation between global South countries. And then I wanted to see, because I knew more or less what happened in e-commerce inside of Brazil, and I wanted to understand what happened in other countries from the BRICS. And then I was looking at each case, and when I arrived to the Chinese case, I was like, oh, this is very different. So I wanted to understand the Chinese case to also understand how other countries could learn and how we could better cooperate using these new technologies and everything. So that was more or less the initial idea. So yeah, it has a lot to do.
Even though none of you pick special or different as the key word of China, that is actually the key word in many people's perspectives. They feel like China has a very special, or at least a little bit different path when it comes to development, because China has its own characteristics. Like you said, it's a vast country. It has a great number of people. The population is also vast. And with a vast land, we have different situations in different local areas, different provinces, different cities, which makes people think that, this is not the kind of development path that I am familiar with. Yet it suits China. Apparently, currently, we get to see that according to many of the achievements, many of the success, many of the path we chose actually suits the country quite well. And today's topic would center around the document that has just been adopted, as well as a new exploration that's issued by the country's president, talking about the resolution, talking about the drafting of it, and how come these points are mentioned in the resolution. And for us, we rarely read political documents that carefully. And for those of you who are not experts on this, just like us, it might sound a little bit complicated, which is why we're going to focus only on the areas that all of you are actually familiar with. But before doing that, I was wondering, do you have any special point of the document that you feel like they're the highlights, you feel like you want to talk about, you want to mention before the discussion of your own areas? Yin?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm personally quite interested in the idea of cultural tourism. And when I was reading through, as I'm sure you know, they released the full decision document of the third plenum, and there was a whole section on culture. And if you look back at the 19th Central Committee third plenum, this was not a section that was emphasized very strongly. So I read through it last night, and it seemed quite fascinating. I think we're in China at a very interesting time where people are trying to articulate what Chinese culture means, this idea of 国潮 and 国产, right? I think that's very fascinating. So I think this third plenum focus on culture is really the government telling folks, stay the course, continue understanding, continue articulating what it means to be Chinese and what Chinese culture is, and I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, I think I was reading the medical sector, so I think especially the new policies are emphasizing more on the infrastructure developments and also making medical, pharmaceutical, and also medical facilities available for the common people, spreading it all around China. I think this is very, very useful, especially from my experience. Like I have been to some rural places, and in many countries of the world, so, like the especially health is not available for everyone, or especially in the rural areas. But in China, I have noticed like the way they are like accessible by the common people, especially in the rural areas. It really surprised me, and I think the world can learn a lot from here, especially the emerging economies. Like many places in China, especially the health in the rural areas, I have seen telemedicine is available, where they are having video conference with the doctors from the cities or something like that. So I think expanding it and making it more and infrastructure-wise, pharmaceutical development, international collaboration, I think this is a very good policy. And I'm really looking forward to see a better China. It's already very good, and I want to see it better in new heights. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. And none of you actually are concentrating on economic front, but we get to see that economic development is kind of like the basis for other issues. We want it to be developed enough so people have a little bit extra cash in their pockets, so they want to travel around. We want the country to be developed enough so that with all the infrastructure that Dr. Zhou mentioned, that can be there to facilitate people having more access, better access to medical care. But Danielle, your story is different because you specifically focus on cross-border e-commerce. It's like economic development is your thing. So what do you think is the highlight of the document? What did you notice?
Okay, that's a hard question. But I think there's always an emphasis on investments in science and education, science and technology. I think since the 13th Five-Year Plan, innovation has been chosen as the driver for Chinese economic growth. And I don't know, from where I researched until now, it is very much clear that since the opening up 78, technology is really important for the different ways that China grew economically. But since the 13th Five-Year Plan, I think innovation is chosen as the key word for that. And we continue seeing this in this past document. I think one interesting highlight that I do notice throughout almost the whole document, it is a process of balancing what China needs for its domestic necessities. So you have the foreign trade, I think they say the foreign trade reforms, the foreign trade adaptations, together with still thinking on expanding beyond of that, and also still thinking about maintaining the development conditions inside. So I think the whole document is this balancing between China maintaining its own developing conditions, but also thinking on expanding beyond, and how you equilibrate these two issues. So I think, yeah.
And when it comes to opening up, actually opening up and deepening reform are closely linked together. We want to communicate with the other countries. We want to open our market to the outside world. And if you take a look at some previous documents and previous policies, we get to see that China has always committed to reform and opening up. 21 pilot free trade zones have been established since the first in Shanghai in 2013. So that's over 10 years ago. And that was with nearly 280 international institutions, innovations, replicated and promoted nationwide. And in the pilot-free zones with 190 restrictive measures, now the number has been cut down to 27 items, because that in 2013, the first negative list for foreign investment access in the pilot zone was established. We get to see now there are only 27. So yes, opening up has always been a keyword, and another keyword definitely would be deepening reform. Actually, over 40 years ago, the word deepening reform was mentioned already in one of the main documents here in the country, pointing at the direction of the development. And for the one that we are discussing right now, the word deepening reform has been mentioned 53 times. So yes, we want to continue reform in different aspects, in different sectors. So I was wondering for you, Ian, do you see any kind of reform or any kind of policies that you feel like are making huge differences in the country for the past couple of years or even a decade?
Absolutely. I remember the first time I really came to mainland China was probably back in 2013, 2014. I came up from Hong Kong to Guangdong to teach English for a summer. And I remember what really struck me in this, rural town was how many people still want to learn English, to be able to go out into the rest of the world, to be able to communicate in English. And then, fast forward to now, and, I'm at Yenching Academy, and everybody else in this community also really wants to connect with the world. And from these two experiences, sort of what I began thinking about was, wow, like there's a township rural area and there's an urban area. They seem very distinct. Yeah, as I've lived here in this country more for the past year, I've learned how these two sort of distinct entities, two distinct geographical locations, are sort of blending together because of all the economic reform. You have a lot of migrant workers deciding to move into these cities. One particular place that was quite fascinating to me was where we live in Beida, in a place called Zhongguancun. And for me, I thought, why is this place called a cun?
A village.
A village.
In Chinese, yes.
Exactly. When it's basically like the Silicon Valley of China. And I remember looking at the history. Apparently, when the Republican government came into power, they were trying to figure out how to make things under administrative units. So they called Zhongguancun a village. But now, with the economic reform and the deepening of, development, a lot of these places are joining in the urbanization route. And I think, that speaks to the ways that people's livelihood has been improved over the past, couple of decades.
I think that is a really good example, because when it comes to sometimes the achievements, the success happen in the country, we talk about lifting 800 million people out of poverty. We talk about the high-speed train all over the country. We talk about urbanization rate getting really high now. Well, not high enough comparing to developed countries, but improving. And in the area that you live in, as well as the area that you focus on, Dr. Nasmus, what do you think are some changes that happened in the past decade?
Well, if you ask me to talk about the changes, I think it's very hard for me if you ask me to pick one. Or if I start saying, I can talk for hours, because there are so many changes. And to be very honest, many people, they ask me, like, since I'm living in Beijing for 14 years, they ask me, do you get bored living for such a long time in this city? I said, no, because I can see China changing every time. And every time I think this is good, comes with a better China. And every time the better never stops. So I have a lot to share, but I would like to pick some few points. For example, I have seen, especially the health sector, how it gets better. For example, now the health sector is more diverse with robotic surgeries. We have new innovations technology-wise, and most of the hospitals are using computerized with softwares or artificial intelligence also included in the health sector. Also, education side, because I studied here. So education sector, the curriculum, research, I can see these all have a huge improvement. And I would like to tell, if you see the research papers, 1 in every 3 papers are from China, because China has exceeded many first world countries right now in terms of research. Not only that, if you talk about infrastructure, convenience of life in Beijing, I would say I couldn't pick one because it's so convenient for me to live in Beijing. For example, I don't have a wallet now. That is something I used to have 14 years back. I need to carry my wallet, but now I don't need to carry my wallet. I just bring my phone. So you can, from this statement, you can see how convenient my life became after 14 years living in China. And also, if you check the infrastructure, if you talk about the, and also, as you know, as I told you, I love traveling. So China is very convenient. Anywhere I want to go, I can easily reach to those places. I can travel, and it's very convenient, especially after the high-speed trains. It has connected with most of China, I would say. So I think these are some of the few things I would like to mention in brief. If I want to talk about these, I can talk for hours. So briefly, I would like to pick these points. Yeah.
These are good points. And in the meantime, I feel like you have been here long enough. Some of your observations are my observations, I feel like. And since we're on the topic of cashless payment systems, I think that falls right into the pocket of Danielle because that's your realm. So you've only been here for less than a year, so it's hard for you to see some differences, I would say. But according to your research, what are some things that stands out for you?
Okay. First, I want to add that, yes, I only have been here for 1 year, but my impression of China already changed a lot because I got to visit a bunch of different places and I was already, oh my God. Me and Ian went to Chengdu and Chongqing together. I hope I'm saying the names right. And it was, my God, I had no idea that this was in China. I went also to Guangzhou recently and I plan on going to Xinjiang. So I've been traveling a lot and been having a lot of fun. But significant changes that China had on the past decade or so, as Dr. Zhou mentioned before, the payment issue, I think is not the issue, the payment solution is quite interesting because you would expect researching about payments and the natural way of that country should develop. You would expect countries to go to cash and then go to credit cards and then maybe mobile wallets or something more advanced. And China, as we know, leapfrogs 100% cards and just goes from cash to mobile wallets. And I think that's really interesting and really significant to my research because thinking about how is this essential to understand how consumption has been growing in China and how China has been growing itself and creating also this new way of approaching how you buy something, being online or being presential. You just take your phone and then you buy with that. And then I'm thinking also about how those companies go to other countries and how they interact with the local systems because each country has its own system of payment and its own habits of consumption. So I think it's essential understanding what happened here to then understand how these companies can go to other regions. And yes, I think this is my
Well, actually, in the document that we discussed earlier, it is stated that we will improve the institutions and mechanisms for fostering new quality productive forces in line with local conditions. And I feel like when you talk about payment method or payment solution, it makes me think about this specific expression about in condition with, well, in line with local conditions. So do you think this is something that only China can adopt, or is it something that can actually be promoted and be introduced to other places in the world?
I think definitely can promote it and introduce to other places in the world as long as you consider the necessary adaptations and conditions. So I remember I wrote an article that wasn't published, but I wrote an article for a conference in 2022 that was looking to Alibaba Group expansion to Malaysia. And then I was looking specifically at digital payments and thinking about how Alibaba Group invested in Touch and Go, which was a digital wallet, which is a digital wallet in Malaysia. And then in my head I was thinking, oh, then those countries are blind, they're receiving investment from China, then very much likely we'll see like a significant growth in the adoption of digital wallets. And we did saw growth, but it wasn't as significant as I was expecting. So I think, yes, definitely, China technology can help other countries, and other countries can be aligned with China to that. But there's always a degree to adaptation and of reality of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, we talk about deepening reform as if it's a major word. It's something that you sit down, you have a meeting, and you have a direction, and you go with that direction. But that is not the only step you take. After that, you do adaptations. You think about local situations and you adjust to it, which is the reason that for some people, the document can be a little bit hard to understand. They find not all of the articles quite straightforward to follow, which is, I feel like it's a good thing because you're leaving the space for people to adjust to their own situations, to their local situations, to the situations of their own company, of their own little team in the company. And as long as the direction is pointed precisely, actually we can follow the right direction and make adjustments that we want. I was wondering, is that the same situation in the health sector for you, Dr. Nesmus? Because we know here in China, we can see that during the past years, for example, now almost everyone is covered by the social health insurance system and basic public health services. We see that average life expectancy increased from 35 years in 1949 to 78.2 years in 2021. And also in 2017, more than 90% of urban public hospitals stopped marking up drugs, which helped control the growth of medical expenses for people here in the country. And also in 2015, we see a general practitioner referral system was introduced to improve accessibility and reduce inappropriate use of high-tier hospitals. So what we know, the theme of deepening reform has always been there. It has been there for over 40 years. Yet when it comes to the real situation in different places, in different, for example, counties or in just one hospital, people would have different ways to interpret the policies and making adaptations to their own situations or in line with their own situations. Do you see that in your experiences as well?
There are many advancements in the health sector. For example, especially like people when they go to the hospital for emergency, from emergency or for getting appointment, everything is now digitalized system. So especially people who are not living in Beijing, let's say they want to come to Beijing, so they can check it online, which is very convenient for them if they can get the appointment or not. Even they can stay back in their home town, go to the nearest hospital, and through telemedication or telemedicine, they can have telemedic conference. They can have get the same treatment or talk to the expertise in Beijing. Without this, I would say the health sector, for example, in Beijing or in the big cities, the health sector is has improved a lot. And usually in my hospital, we have many training programs which are conducted for doctors from all over China, and also international conferences, which helps the doctors to share experience and get the skills. Improve their skills, and this is possible. Like if you consider international conferences, some of the international conferences are done by 5G technology through online. So I think the deformation or the latest, the hospital sectors, they are using the latest technologies to make health more accessible for the people, and also for the doctor's training, for the patient and doctor relationship, making it more convenient, especially let's say people who cannot come to Beijing, they can go for telemedicine from their hometown, and they can get the same treatment staying in their hometown. So I think this advancement has helped them a lot.
This is very interesting because we know that you've traveled to multiple countries. You travel in China quite a lot, and also internationally. We know you've traveled to the United States, Canada, Japan, Russia, Mexico, South Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, Egypt. The list goes on. And we know when it comes to pointing at a direction and go for it, actually we all have the same goal, especially in the health sector. We want to give people better living standards. We want to help them deal with the disease. Sometimes doctors can heal, but most occasions, actually all of the occasions, doctors would always also tell you what to do to deal with the disease that you're struggling with. These are some common goals, not only here in China, but internationally. But when it comes to the Chinese situation, do you think China is, let's say, having something stand out for you, especially you've compared situations in all these different countries?
Well, I'm very lucky to visit many places for medical conferences or for visiting also. When I compare the health sector, even the best technologies or I think the Chinese, the biggest difference between the Chinese health system and the, let's say, the developed countries' health system is, number one, appointment. So if you want to get appointment from those doctors in the advanced countries, you have to wait for a really long time, which is not the case in China. In China, they have alternate options. They have community clinics. They have like telemedicine. They have like, even I went to Xinjiang, and I have been to a very Karamay I think Kalamai in Chinese. Yeah, I went to Karamay, and I have been to a suburb area, and I can see in their home, in the county, they have written their doctor's numbers, and I asked, how do you get the health service? They said, if I call the number, the doctor will come to my place. I'm like, wow, that is something I don't expect in many countries. Also, if you check, most of the Chinese people are covered with insurance, so which makes it affordable. And Chinese health system is more suitable for the world with developing countries and emerging economies, because China has a lot of innovations which makes it cheaper for many countries to follow. For example, if you go for the first world countries, or the technology they use is not affordable, and many countries cannot follow those procedures. For example, in my country, and China, we can do joint collaborations, and we can learn from each other. And a lot of technologies that we use in China are affordable, and it can be used in my country so that more people can get health service. But if we establish the first world countries expensive procedures, which makes it very expensive for emerging economies, and they cannot even follow those. So I think this is something China has advantage, and China could be a role model for this, especially in the emerging economies, and many countries can learn from China how to minimize the cost and give the same high standard health service.
I think it's evident that you have a lot of insights and understandings in the healthcare sector, which makes me want to ask you what's your advice for future development. But we can go back to that a bit later, because we also have another international citizen here. You've also had a lot of experience in different countries, especially we mentioned in China, Japan, and the United States. So for these different countries, and also since you concentrate on international cooperation as well as local governance, I was wondering, because I have always been taking an interest in the Greater Bay Area.
Right.
I think it's a very dynamic area, and I have lived in Hong Kong for a year, and I love to see these different cities in different areas communicating with each other and collaborating with each other. For those of you who don't know, actually the Greater Bay Area is a mega region that is progressively integrating and actually revamping 9 major cities within the Pearl River Delta, plus 2 special administrative regions, that is the Hong Kong and Macau. All of these are integrated into a single globally competitor to on par with existing leading city clusters like the San Francisco, Tokyo, New York areas, which I'm pretty sure you're familiar with. So for this area, what do you think are some interesting features of the current status of the Greater Bay Area? And also, is it different from the other city clusters that we've already mentioned?
Right. I think that's a very interesting question. And, you guys have talked about how we can cooperate between countries. I think this is another great example of, you have the San Francisco Bay Area, you have the New York, you have Tokyo, and now in China you have the Greater Bay Area as well. So this is an example of sort of that cross-country collaboration. In terms of the Greater Bay Area itself, I think it's quite fascinating given the fact that, to your point, there are 2 special administrative regions, then you have Guangdong, and then within that you have all these different cities. So how can these different regional jurisdictions work with each other to create a cohesive, harmonized system? I think that's quite interesting. Growing up, we would always talk about these different sort of infrastructures that we would want to build within the Greater Bay Area. We would talk about bridges, we would talk about the high-speed rail. And I recently went back to Hong Kong this past break, and I have a friend now who's living in Zhuhai, and she said to me, hey, would you like to come visit me? And in my head, I thought, as a kid, we would have to take a ferry. It'd be super far away. I don't really want to go there. And she said, no, don't worry. You can take, just a bus across the bridge now, and you can get to Zhuhai within an hour. And that's what I did. You can take the bus from downtown Hong Kong, and you can go right to Zhuhai. I spent a day there with her, and then I came back by bus, on the way back. So I think that really speaks to sort of this hard infrastructure that's being built to make sure that there's connectivity within the region. I think the next sort of steps that we need to start thinking about is how do we harmonize some of the soft infrastructure, the tax system, the education. You know, if I have kids and I move to a different city, I want to make sure that my children are still able to access healthcare and education. So I think as you know, the Greater Bay Area continues to be built out, we have a lot of the hard infrastructure to make sure people can travel. Let's try and build out some of the ways to make sure people's quality of life can maintain the same regardless of where in the region they are.
I don't have a solution to your desire, but I think the country has already pointed out one, because there has been the talking of having these projects to achieve a 1-hour living circle, such as the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge and a high-speed rail connecting Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou. And if we have that 1-hour living circle, apparently you can take your kids anywhere living in Greater Bay Area and going to school in other places, in other cities if you want. So that is one example I can also think of when it comes to the Greater Bay Area. And we know in 2023, the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area experienced significant growth, with its gross domestic product reaching over 14 trillion yuan. That is nearly 2 trillion US dollars. This is 1/9 of China's total GDP, and represents 11% of the country's GDP, despite making up less than 0.6% of its land and 6% of its population. So yeah, that's the power of having the right policies and having the right structure and having all these different cities working together, forming the city clusters. And hopefully we get to see more of these kind of framework, these kind of policies happening in other parts of the country as well. And in that case, actually, we know that China is a world leader in digital infrastructure, with the digital e-commerce or digital economy now accounting for about 44% of China's GDP. And according to Cao Heping, an economist at Peking University also, he said that in the next 5 years, the ratio of China's digital economy to the national GDP could further grow to over 50%, marking the successful transition into a growth model powered by digital technologies. So, according to this saying, as well as the policies that's been stipulated in the resolution we've already talked about for a while. So for Danielle, in your opinion, with this resolution, with this new policy documents, do you see any further developing direction or anything we should pay attention to when it comes to e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce here in this country?
No, I think about the term new quality productive forces, which I was reading about yesterday, because I was thinking, that's a broad term, let me think about it. And at the end of the day, it's any technology that can heighten the capacity of producing to a degree and level that is not seen today, that it can change the way that you can produce things by using the technology. I think that's a way of explaining this term. And I think that, I don't know, you could look at many places thinking about e-commerce. You can think about using AI technologies to further organize and further think about where do you establish your e-commerce zones and how do you advance further that. But I think, yeah, I think the big word that comes to mind now is AI regarding these technologies for that.
So according to your research, you've been studying e-commerce, you've been studying payment method. Do you see some current problems that need to be addressed, or certain things that you see potential, you think we should go for it?
So considering the points that I mentioned before about China needing to balance the necessity of developing inside and using technologies for its own ends, versus also thinking about its expansion to other countries, because the relations are important for China's own growth also, and commerce is important and everything like this. I think that, and also considering the issue of adaptation, I think that one interesting thing would be further understanding and further researching what are the challenges in the regions that China wants to expand to. I think that on the case of digital commerce, China has very successfully expanded and established ties with Southeast Asia. More and more we see developments on that. But we also have regions where more work is still needed, I believe. So for instance, Latin America, there is a significant Chinese presence there. But when you look at documents, a lot of Chinese e-commerce companies comment that they still quite don't understand why it's not as successful as in other regions. So I think perhaps further study into that. But I don't know if there's a need for any adaptations in the technology side or anything like this. That goes a bit beyond my research.
you can further study, and
I will further study.
after a year, we can do a show together,
Yes.
and you will be talking about it for an hour, and I don't have to say anything, because I believe with this kind of dedication and the fact that you're studying one of the best universities here in China, you would have a really good answer when the day comes. But it's okay. I understand these are difficult questions, but these are questions need to be answered, and that is why we're having this meeting, having this resolution, and further having this explanation on the resolution, because we need to know where to go in order to actually be there. The same goes with the health sector. We know here in China, we've talked about all the achievements, but coming from a relative of a doctor, a cardiovascular to be more precise, that's my mom's job, I understand the struggles doctors are having, because here in China, you have to see patients actually over 100 patients a day. That is not the situation in other countries. But for most doctors, the doctors believe that they would love to see the patients. They want to help the patients. So as a doctor, as a pediatrician, to be more precise, do you think there are certain developing directions you hope your hospital would like to take? Or what are some issues that you like to address, you think that should be addressed?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for health sector is lack of information. So I think we can have more and more conferences, for example, which we are already doing, but I think we can do it more and discuss more about the rare diseases especially, so that we can get familiar with the diseases, and so that we can do research together about diseases for the betterment of the world, because health doesn't care about borders. It's for the world, and for the betterment of the world, I think we all should come together and do more and more cooperations and save more people.
And in the same time, my feeling is that when it comes to medical service, we want the accessibility to be as high as possible. I think that is part of the reasons that the country has these 4 systems that are the public health service, medical insurance, and drug supply guarantee systems, so that people with the need to actually have access in a relatively lower price can actually do that. And in the meantime, again, from the perspective of a doctor's daughter, I also want doctors to get the treatment that they deserve. You've been working really hard. You've been receiving this years of education and accumulating experiences, and you deserve to have all the chance and opportunities that you want. So yes, a lot of international cooperation, as you said, hopefully will happen in the future. And in the meantime, we see that here in the country, the issue of talent training as well as further education has been in the spotlight. Even in the resolution itself, we talk about the fact that having enough talent to work in different areas, different sectors in the country is vital to the Chinese modernization. And actually, we say people are the center of China's practices of comprehensively deepening reform. And the scale of China's higher education continued to expand, and now it boasts the largest number of science and engineering graduates in the world, among its more than 240 million highly educated graduates. And you, all of you, are young, talented, and in the best universities here in China and around the world. I was wondering, for example, for you, Ian, what do you think can be done in the area of training for talents?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. I think, coming from a perspective of an international school student or an exchange student, it would be lovely to have more programs like the Yenqings of the world. I know that Schwartzman at Tsinghua is another example of inviting a lot of folks from abroad to come in to learn in China. I think one of the things that I've really appreciated about my experience is, yes, you have, within your own college, your Yenqing college, you have your classes that you can take, but there's also the opportunity to take classes in the broader Peking University system, and that way you can talk to some of those students in those classes, learn what they think, and then you can have that sort of international collaboration, be it, in the classroom or be it, doing intramural sports. So I think, coming from my own experience as an outsider coming in, as China thinks, what its path forward should be in education, I think it should be internationalizing and welcoming more folks like us who want to understand this country and want to come here and learn.
So if you have one suggestion to those who wanted to come to China and learn, or to those who are currently in China and ready to go to abroad to seek further education, what is your advice?
It's a good question. I think if you want to come to China, just find a way in first. I mean, apply. Don't worry about whether or not you're qualified or not. Send over an application, be it to an educational institution like Peking University, or be it a job teaching a language. For instance, I think the most important step is being brave enough to be willing to come to a foreign country and really trying to ingratiate yourself into a community. And I think part of that is working here, living here, and also learning the language. I think as you learn the language, that opens up so many doors for you. And it's a pathway that's tough, but one that I would highly recommend.
So learn the language, open your heart to possibilities, and make a move. Okay, so for Dr. Nazmuz, I want to ask you, because you have been benefiting from learning in international mechanisms. So first of all, I was wondering, in terms of international cooperation, do you think there are enough opportunities provided for young talents here in China, especially in the medical sector?
Well, between China and many countries, they are having more and more cooperations, and young doctors, they are coming to China for training, and doctors from different parts of the world, they are coming to China for training. Now we have, like, let's say in Capital Medical University, they have like 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year training, where people from different parts of the world are coming, and in China, they can learn the latest, they can get themselves familiar with the latest technology that is affordable and usable in any part of the world. And also, I think, like, for example, when the trainings are happening, people are also learning more about the traditional Chinese medicine, which is also very important. Traditional Chinese medicine is more like prevention. So it boosts your immune system. I myself, I'm a Western medicine doctor, but I myself, some of the symptoms, or when I get sick, like let's say common cold or something, I prefer to go for traditional Chinese medicine because it's very important and it has no side effects, almost no side effects. So it's more, because as it's made of natural herbs, so it boosts your immune system and it makes your body more healthy. So since there are more training programs like this, and especially for the youth, they can get alternative, they can get themselves familiar with alternative medicines, which is the TCM. And I also, when they're having this kind of exchange programs or doctors learning program, we are getting ourselves familiar with diseases in different parts of the world. And China, it's a huge country, and there are many rare diseases that can be found because, China, the population. So for medicine, if you want to be a doctor, doctor, we don't say, I work as a doctor, I practice as a doctor. So the word practice means the more patients you see is the better doctor you can be. So China is the best place, I think, for doctors. If you want to be a good doctor, then China is the best place. And the doctors, the hospitals, and especially the professors, the supervisors are very, very friendly. And they conduct all the trainings, and they take you to the hospitals. They, how to say it, like, they will, it's not just observership, they will just help you, they will guide you with all the procedures and everything. So I think it's very, very important for the youth especially to be a good doctor, or to be a better doctor. I would tell them, I would suggest all of them, they should come to Beijing or China for at least short time. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there is at least one doctor or doctor student or a medical student out there watching the show, getting ready to come to China. Anything you want to say to him or her?
Well, I think in China there are plenty of opportunities to learn. Also, you can find the latest technologies which you can use back in your country. So I think China is a great place if you want to be a good doctor. So welcome to China.
Just come over.
Yeah.
Okay, so Danielle, you are benefiting from international cooperation or studying in another country. What's your overall experience for the past year?
I have been very lucky to be here, and I have been very happy to be in China. I have been learning a lot, especially with the language, thinking on Ian's advice. I didn't know any Chinese before coming to China, and it does help knowing Chinese in China. So I think, yeah, learning Chinese has been very interesting, and I've been very fascinated, I think. Yeah.
You know a lot of Chinese friends and classmates, right, when you're here. Anything you want to say to them?
Thank you so much for being that patient with me, with my tones and everything.
Okay, so for if you have the chance to talk to a young Chinese who is willing to go outside, see the world, even though we know that the world is kind of in a turbulent situation with all the problems and the conflicts happening around the world, with the technology developing so fast that common folks like us feel like, wow, it's hard for us to keep up the pace to it. With all that, do you still recommend people to go outside of their country to study, to meet new people, to have foreign friends?
Yes, I definitely recommend you to go to other places, learn the local language. English, of course, tends to be very helpful for any program, but I think we should never stop communicating with other countries if we want to foster better relations, if we want to better understand the other one. This is why I first came to China, and I think more people should do that. So yeah, definitely.
Thank you. It's been a lovely conversation. Thank you so much for providing your insights from your own perspectives. And I feel like your stories have painted a vivid picture of the country's evolving and transforming landscape. And for those of you who wanted to catch the replay of the show, you can find us on all major CGTN platforms, including our official website, including Facebook, X, or WeChat, video channel, or Weibo. Just make sure you search for CGTN. You get to see us. And until next time, stay curious and stay informed. This is Niu Honglin. I'll see you next time.